All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Facts Over Feelings podcast. I'm back here once again with my co-host Trevor Kaufman, and we're back this week talking about obviously none other than the sports world. And we wanted before we talked about the NBA, which by the way, Trevor, is coming down to the wire. We're coming in. It feels like it's been a long season, and it really has been. It's been nice to have a full season, but we're coming to the last month. I think Trevor, right? We have about a month left, maybe a little more.
The last day of the regular season is May 16th. So
Yeah,
literally
just over a month. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
about a month. So we're coming to the home stretch, which is it's really exciting. But before we get there, we wanted to talk about some football, some NFL news that took place the last few days. Just a couple of signings for a couple of teams in the NFL. It's kind of funny. It's both of our teams, Trevor, in the Arizona Cardinals and the Cleveland Browns. The draft is in about, I think, Trevor, it's in about 2 weeks from tomorrow. So we have the NFL draft coming up. But I wanted to talk about these signings. And first, I wanted to talk about the signing of James Conner in Arizona. And I wanted to ask you, Trevor, as a Cardinals fan, like, how did you feel about the signing? Good, bad, didn't really care?
For me, it's not that consequential. It's a 1-year deal. He's not going to get paid that much money. He's shown that he can be a capable starting running back in this league. He hasn't been great. I don't think Chase Edmonds, I do like Chase Edmonds a lot, but I don't think he's a lead down back. I think James Conner can be a lead down back. And for me, running back was definitely a position of need after losing Kenyon Drake. For me, as I said, it's an inconsequential contract. It's 1 year. I think James Conner has, proven to be a solid, at least an average running back in this league. And for me, now we don't maybe have to waste a first or second round pick on a running back. So I'm okay with the signing. I don't love the signing. I don't hate it. For me, it's just kind of like, eh. But I look forward to seeing what James Conner can do because he did have a couple really good years in Pittsburgh. So we'll see. But I like the move by my Cardinals, and I really hope James Conner can find some fresh legs here. Stay healthy, too.
Yeah, no, it's a big thing. So first thing I thought of when I saw the signing, and I was just kind of, I was kind of disappointed only because I knew going into free agency, anyone who signed James Conner, like, I don't think he has much in the tank, if I'm being honest. I mean, his story's fantastic, Trevor. Don't get me wrong. He has one of the best stories out of anyone in the National Football League. But he can't really stay on the field. I think he's missed 3 to 5 games in every single season of his career. He hasn't had a fully healthy season. And as an aging running back, that's not going to improve most likely, right? I mean, your body gets beat up, at the running back position more so than any other position in the NFL. So the wear and tear on his body is definitely not going to go away. So hopefully he can stay on the field, but I'm not really optimistic about that. And I don't think he's that great of a runner. But what I will say is the Cardinals got great value. A 1-year deal, Trevor. I think it was just over $1 million for James Conner. That's a great deal. It's basically like a win-win situation because it's a 1-year deal, only for 1 year. You're not with him for multiple years, and it's a really cheap contract. So, what do you really have to lose? At the very least, you're getting a guy who will give you some good goal line touches, right? Can punch it in from a couple yards out, and that's something you needed because, as you said, Chase Edmonds isn't really an every down back kind of guy. He's just not. He's not built. He's just not big enough to really profile as an every down guy. So that's kind of, I think, obviously what the Cardinals were going for here to get a guy who could kind of come in for first downs or short yardage situations or goal to go situations. And that's what they did. Right. So it's fine. But I really do hope that this doesn't dissuade the Cardinals from drafting a running back in the second, third, or fourth rounds, because I really think there's some solid running backs, Trevor, in this draft. Especially, some of the middle round guys, Javonte Williams out of North Carolina, Kenneth Gainwell out of Memphis. There's a couple nice running backs outside of the top 2 that I think the Cardinals should look at. And I think they are looking at because they need a long-term solution at running back. And I don't think Edmonds is it long-term. I don't think Conner is it long-term. You got to get someone young. So I'm hoping that this doesn't dissuade them from getting a middle tier running back in the draft. Because I think that'd be the right move for them. But, as long as they stick to that plan, I think this is a solid signing.
I agree. And again, my point is don't use a first or second round pick on a running back. I think there are much bigger needs out there. And the running back position, in my opinion, and Ryan and I have talked about this 100 times.
Yeah.
The running back position is not a position of particular importance in today's NFL. Running backs are cycled It's important, but running backs are cycled through very
Individual running
often.
backs, yeah.
And I think you can find a good running back in the 4th round of an NFL draft. And I'm totally fine with doing that as a Cardinals fan. But let's get a corner in the 1st round, maybe get another O lineman, maybe get another defensive player in the 2nd round. And let's worry about running backs later on in the draft. But I like the James Conner signing, and I agree with you. I think it's a good short-term solution.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's exactly what the Cardinals were going for. And I mean, that's what they got. So I will say one more thing before we move on, Trevor. I think also it's really important to note how much money Kenyon Drake got from the Raiders to be a guy in a committee. He got $7.5 million. No,
Yeah, that's a lot.
$6.5 million, I believe. $13 million over 2 seasons, I believe, is what the price was. That's a dramatic price increase over what they paid for James Conner. So to save $5 million a year and to save about $12 million over the next 2 seasons, to get a guy who's, in my opinion, Drake and Conner aren't that different. I mean, Drake might have a little more left in the tank. He might be able to stay on the field a little bit more, but I don't think Drake's a world beater, and Connor isn't either. So I think that the value the Cardinals got by letting Drake go and getting Connor is a good one. So
Yes.
I just wanted to point that
Totally
out.
agree.
Yeah.
Good point there.
Yeah, but Trevor, moving on to the other signing that happened today, this Wednesday evening, Trevor, was with my Cleveland Browns, and it was something that was in the rumor mill for a while, but it didn't really get done until today. And that's Jadeveon Clowney going to Cleveland, going to the Browns for 1 year, $8 million guaranteed. And I think it's up to $10 million in incentives. So a total of $2 million in incentives, $8 million guaranteed. And yeah, Trevor, what are your thoughts on this deal? Solid?
No, I like it. I think for the Browns, it's really going to complete your defensive line. Now that you have 2, at least 1 elite edge rusher in Myles Garrett and 1, past elite rusher in Jadeveon Clowney. I don't know if I would still consider him an elite edge rusher, but still very capable of getting to the quarterback.
Yeah.
I think $8 million for him is a decent amount, but if you look at the defensive end market the value of what an edge rusher is and how expensive or how big are these contracts, I look at JJ Watt, who's also a sort of aging edge rusher. I forgot. I think we're paying him like 11 or 12 million a year or something like that. So for me, $8 million for Clowney isn't bad. I would have probably preferred to see the contract be a little bit more incentive laden. Just because Jadeveon Clowney has commitment issues, he has locker room issues. Is he committed to a team? Is he focused all the time? A little lazy here and there. So for me, $8 million guaranteed is a lot. I probably would have gone closer to 4 or 5 million guaranteed, and then maybe 4 or 5 million in performance incentives. But I think for the Browns, it's a solid contract. Clearly, Cleveland is, I'm not going to say going all in on this year, but excuse me, Cleveland is primed to make a deep AFC run this year. And I think they have all the tools for it. They have had a great offseason on the defensive side. And we're going to see. They're getting Odell back next year. We'll see how that helps or maybe even hurts them. They were great without him. So I think it was I actually like what Clowney did here. He came to Cleveland. I think it's an attractive free agent destination based on what we saw last year. So we'll see. I don't love the contract, but I think for the Browns, it's another weapon on the defense.
Yeah, I mean, I have a few thoughts about this. So first off is Clowney has been of interest for the Browns for the last 2 seasons. The Browns tried to get him last year. They tried to get him. He ended up going to Tennessee. It didn't work out. Clowney also visited, I think, Trevor, about a month ago, 3 weeks ago in Cleveland, didn't come away with a contract and comes back a second time, finally gets a contract. So he's been pursued by Cleveland for quite some time now, for 2 straight off seasons, multiple visits, and finally they got him. So Andrew Berry clearly wanted him. Something that I think is interesting, is important to note, is that Clowney has always been very hesitant to come to Cleveland. And that, to me, makes me nervous because you talk about Clowney kind of having commitment issues, or not commitment, but kind of has trouble, putting in full effort a lot of times. It seems like he doesn't really put in, everything he's got all the time.
Right.
He seems like a guy who maybe lacks that extra work ethic that a player normally has, or the best players have. And so, a guy who seemingly didn't really want to come here last year, a guy who's kind of taken a while to decide to come here, I'm just, in the back of my mind, it's a little bit like, okay, like, how much does he really want to be here versus how much is he really just kind of coming here, just for himself to boost his individual stats, to get out and get a big contract with another team. So that's kind of in the back of my head, but just talking about this in general, I mean, Clowney is a great signing for the Browns. I mean, I think $8 million guaranteed is a little much. I think it's fine. I'm glad. I believe Trevor, it's less than Watt. I don't know if you off the top of your
It
head how
is.
much Watt. Yeah, Watt's obviously a better player, but he is older as well. So I just kind of was comparing those two. I'd say they're pretty even in terms of they're a little bit overvalued. Those contracts a little inflated, but you got to pay a pretty penny for the bigger names. Clowney's one of those guys who has a big name, doesn't necessarily live up to the expectation on the field,
Mm-hmm.
but his name is so much bigger than like how good he actually is on the field that you're kind of almost paying for that name.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's been known for that hit he had at South Carolina his whole career, and it'll always
Mm-hmm.
follow him for the rest of his career. So kind of you're paying a little bit of a premium because he's such a big name. But it's a great deal because Myles Garrett is one of the best edge rushers in football. And now Jadeveon Clowney doesn't really have to worry about getting double teamed, Trevor. I mean, he has Myles Garrett on their side. Like
Right.
he doesn't really have to worry about it. And this is also important because if he's not getting double teamed, right? If he's going one-on-one, I think that Jadeveon Clowney is going to win his battle more often than not. And if you're looking at pass rush win rates, right? So how often does Jadeveon Clowney beat his man? Jadeveon Clowney is fifth in the NFL since 2018 in beating his man at 25%. Myles Garrett's third at 26%, right? So you have two guys in the top five in that category. And that category, Trevor, to me is more important than sacks. Jadeveon Clowney has 3 sacks in the last 2 years. And that, can turn off a lot of the casual fans. But sacks are not the stat you want to look at. You want to look at how often they pressure the quarterback. Because sacks can be caused from coverage sacks, right? It can be caused by QB's lack of awareness or pocket,
Right.
vision. But pass rush, how often you win your one-on-one battle is more important. How often you actually get to the quarterback and affect the throw. And Clowney does that at a high clip. So I think that him with Garrett is going to be a lethal combo as long as Clowney can stay on the field and put in a decent amount of effort. And he's good in the run game. He's one of the best DNs in the run game. He can seal the edge very well. And that's what he's been known for a lot of his career outside of just pure rushing the quarterback. So I like the signing, a little overvalued in the contract, but I think it'll work out really well, especially with Malik Jackson and Sheldon Richardson also on the line with the two of them.
Yeah, I agree that Browns line is stacked. And you talked about Clowney being double teamed. And I look back to probably his best years in the NFL where he had a couple of really nice years with Houston and he made the Pro Bowl. And who was he pass rushing alongside of? JJ Watt was on the other side of that line.
Yep.
So I think there's a similar dynamic here with Myles Garrett probably getting now into his prime. And Myles Garrett's going to be a problem for many years to come. And we'll see how that affects Jadeveon Clowney. He can already get to the quarterback at a high clip. And I think it's only going to get higher because he has an elite edge rusher to the other side of him and two very solid interior D linemen next to him as well. So that Browns defense, man, they got really good this offseason.
Yeah, I will say before we move on, Joe Woods has no excuse now. I mean, if you're the D coordinator, as a Browns fan, you got to expect to have at least a top 10 or 12 defense. Like anything less, and you're really questioning whether Joe Woods as the D coordinator is doing his job because you have all the talent, right? I mean, outside of the linebacker position, the Browns are pretty loaded at safety, corner, D line now, right? I mean, you have almost every position that you'd want.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah. So, Trevor, I think with that, unless you have anything else, we can move on from the NFL. We can move on and, just wait until that NFL draft in a few weeks and move on to the NBA. Trevor's favorite subject every single week. And why wouldn't it be? The NBA is, getting electric this time of year. And, shout out to Trevor's Phoenix Suns. I do have to say, I watched them last night. They beat the Miami Heat by I believe, 20 points. I mean, this team's just cleaning house. They continue to do so. Lost to the Clippers this past week, but, who hasn't in the last 2 weeks? But shout out to them. They're playing great basketball, and they might be legit. But, I still don't think they'll go too far. I still don't think they'll go too far in the playoffs. But anyway, we will dive right into this NBA here. I wanted to start off with something kind of some sad news. And that involves Denver Nuggets point guard Jamal Murray. He, with about, I believe, Trevor, less than a minute left in the game or less than 2 minutes left in the game, went down when they were down by like 7 or 8. So the game was probably over. And he goes down to the basket and hurt his knee. And he ended up tearing his ACL, which is brutal injury for not only Jamal Murray, but the Denver Nuggets as a team. And Trevor, I wanted to ask you, like, how does this impact the Nuggets going forward? Like, are they still a threat in the playoffs?
In my opinion, it changes everything because You saw in the bubble during their playoff run, it was all Jokic and Murray. That was their entire team, right? And that was with Michael Porter in the lineup. Now they do have Aaron Gordon, which I think helps them in this case. Aaron Gordon's going to kind of have to take on a little bit of a bigger role than maybe originally thought. But Jamal Murray's a huge loss. We saw what he could do in the playoffs last year. He's their point guard. He is, arguably their floor general. I guess him and Jokic probably share those duties. And Jamal Murray is a very, very, very good scorer. I don't know if I want to say he's an elite scorer. In the playoffs last year, he was an elite scorer. He has been a little inconsistent at times with his shot, but he is an excellent scorer in this league. He was an excellent number 2 for this Denver team for a couple of years now, and he's a huge loss. And for me, it does. I do think Denver is not going to – I don't think Denver gets out of the – Denver might not even get out of the first round now, depending on who they play.
Wow.
Right? If they have to play a Portland or an LA based on where the standings and how the Western Conference is kind of shaping out right now, I could very well see Denver losing in that first round. For me, I don't think they get to the Western Conference Finals anymore. I just think Jamal Murray's a huge loss. And I don't know if Michael Porter Jr. and Aaron Gordon are good enough to fill those shoes. And also, who's their backup point guard? Is it that Facundo Campazzo? I think is the Argentinian guy.
Yeah, I think so.
I don't really.
They were looking at signing Austin Rivers, I believe, like today. So maybe that's what they're going to do. But
so maybe they'll get like they'll bring in a guy, but they don't really have a backup point guard to Jamal Murray. So we'll see how this affects them. I think it's a huge loss. And it sucks because Jamal Murray is a great player. And Denver kind of coming along here in the second half of the season made this really interesting. And I'm not saying Denver's not going to, remain in the conversation, but I just really think when your second best player goes down for the season, it's just hard to fill those shoes. And especially in a really hard Western Conference. So we'll see what happens, but I think this is a huge loss for Denver.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, right? I mean, plain and simple, you take the second best player off any playoff team, and it absolutely decimates their chances. You take Anthony Davis off the Lakers, you take Kyrie Irving, or James Harden off the Nets, you take Chris Paul or Devin Booker, whoever you think's the second best, off of those Suns. Every team will become worse, obviously. But the Nuggets, they're getting hit especially hard because Jamal Murray, you're right. It was a 2-man game with him and Jokic last year in the bubble. And I'm sure that's what they've been running the whole year. And that's what they were going to run in the playoffs. And now they have to totally change that. And Trevor, obviously it's a big blow. He's one of the best point guards in the NBA. He's the second best player on that team. For me, it's dependent on one thing, and it's if Michael Porter Jr. can step up. Because this is his opportunity right here, Trevor. Michael Porter Jr., sometimes got frustrated with that 2-man game in the bubble. I believe he made a mention of being frustrated of that last year, not really getting involved much. And now's his opportunity. Yep. He can take over if he wants. Try to run a 2-man game with Nikola Jokic. See what you have to offer as a 6'9" small forward, 6'8" small forward. He's a very good young player who could start to show out this year if he wants to take the reins and is able to. I don't know if he'll be able to. I will say he is off to a great start. The first half of their game tonight against Miami, he has 17 points on 7 of 8 shooting and 9 boards. So he's off to a great start, Ryan. So I'm glad you brought up that point because I literally have their box score pulled up right here. There you go.
So if he does that consistently, then maybe they still have a shot. But
yeah, I mean, so they're up by 12 right now to Miami. And if they continue this, looks like they will win this game. And that's what he needs to do. If the Nuggets want any chance, Trevor, he needs to play like an all-star caliber player. And if he does that, Trevor, I think they could win some playoff series just like they would have if Murray was there. So it's all dependent on if Porter can fill that void. Obviously, I have my doubts. Obviously, the loss of Murray hurts the Nuggets, but maybe Porter can step up, and we'll see if he can.
I agree. But honestly, for Jamal Murray, get well soon. And, hopefully he's ready by the start of next season. I don't know. Because next season starts, you think it's March. Next season will probably start in November at some point. So that's 7 or 8 months down the road. So we'll see if he's ready to go by the start of next season. Or I guess it's April now.
Yeah.
But yeah, ACL is a tough injury to come back from. And I just, you hope that it doesn't affect the rest of his career. You hope he can come back and play at the high level he was at before the injury. That's always the big concern with these things, right?
Yep. No, I mean, 100%. I really hope that, it doesn't affect his future career. And,
with that being said, Ryan, moving on to a bit of a lighter note, we are going to talk about a couple teams. We do this every week now since the NBA season started. And Ryan, go ahead. Talk about one of your two teams you want to talk about.
Yeah, so I'll talk about the New York Knicks to start off. And, this, might be like, okay, why are you talking about the Knicks? And, a normal person, that's a reasonable question to ask. Why are you talking about the New York Knicks? I'll tell you why. They are currently, Trevor, the 7th seed in the Eastern Conference, tied for the 6th seed, really. They will take over the 6th seed if Miami were to lose tonight. And the New York Knicks, they're performing well this year. I kept waiting, Trevor. I didn't want to talk about them this whole year because I was like, no, the Knicks will fall off. They're the Knicks, right? They'll start
Right.
losing. They'll start tanking like they always do. They don't have that much talent. But, they just keep hanging in there. And they continue to do that. They're winners of 4 straight now, Trevor, to take over that 7th spot. They were slipping a little bit. They were falling a little bit behind, but they've started to step it up and kind of put the pedal to the metal. And I got to shout out this team. And more specifically, I got to shout out their head coach, Tom Thibodeau, because he's really, really done the job for them this year. And I had my doubts about Tom Thibodeau, Trevor, because he had a great Bulls team around, when he was head coach there. I believe he was also the coach of the Timberwolves, right? Am I correct in saying that?
Yeah.
And he struggled there. They didn't get the job done. It blew up in their face, and that didn't work out. So I was like, I don't know if this is going to work with a below average roster, not a lot of great players. Like, what will he be able to do? I'll tell you what he was able to do this year. He's able to have the number 1 defense in the NBA. The New York Knicks had the number 1 defense in the NBA with their best player of Julius Randle, RJ Barrett, Mitchell Robinson, Emmanuel Quickley, guys like that. They're the number 1 defense in the NBA, only allowing 104 points a game. And I needed to point that out because what a turnaround in one season. Tom Thibodeau has really done wonders for this team on the defensive side of the ball. And it just shows you a team that can play scrappy, that can play you close, that can play defense in today's NBA can still overperform with arguably a pretty bad roster, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, it's not a great roster at all.
Yeah. So I just want to shout out the Knicks. Credit to the Knicks. Credit to Julius Randle for continuing his really good play this year, coming off his all-star appearance this year. 23 a game in points, 11 rebounds, 6 assists. He's shooting, he's playing lights out, 40% from the 3-point line. And RJ Barrett also making a nice step this year, 17 points a game, and more importantly, shooting 38% from 3 and 47% from inside the 3-point line. Shooting efficiently, not turning the ball over too much, 2 turnovers a game. That's not too terrible. Improving this year from last. So I think that's encouraging. Those 2 players right there definitely carrying this team. And with Mitchell Robinson as a defensive anchor. So I think this team just needed to be shouted out because their defense has stepped up big time. They've had some players make some progression this year. And it looks like, barring collapse, they will make the playoffs. So, kudos to the Knicks for doing that.
Yeah, I totally agree with almost everything you just said there. I'm glad you mentioned RJ Barrett because I do think he deserves a lot of credit. I think he has taken a nice step forward this year. He's averaging 17.5 a game, as you mentioned. I want to highlight, the majority of what I say here is about Julius Randle. And I think there was a very interesting story. And I think this has definitely contributed to the Knicks' success. Julius Randle, when he was in LA with Kobe, Kobe talked to him about every city they flew into for a road game. That night, Kobe would find a local gym, a church or whatever, and go put shots up, no matter how late or early in the morning it was. And Julius Randle has adopted this, according to what I saw in this video. He's adopted this policy. He's adopted this extra work ethic, and he's gotten some of his teammates to do it with him. I don't know the names, but apparently now these Knicks players will fly into a city, no matter how late at night, how early in the morning, and they'll go get extra shots up at a church, at a indoor court somewhere. And I think it's that added level and extra level of work that has allowed them to find the success. And particularly individually in Julius Randle's game, 23 a game this season, 11 boards, 6 assists. He's doing it all for this team. And I really do think that, that story has had a huge effect on him and the rest of this team. And I also want to give Tom Thibodeau a lot of credit because I have heard in the past that he is not the easiest guy to be coached for, or to play for. Yep. He tends to ride players pretty hard. He's a bit more of an in-your-face, tough kind of guy. And for a young team that, sometimes these guys who don't play a lot of defense in high school and college, that might not be in their DNA to be yelled at about, your defense. So I'm really glad that these young guys, particularly RJ Barrett and a couple others, Emmanuel Quickly, have adopted, wanting to play defense, because I really do think that benefits teams later on in the season and come playoff time. The Knicks obviously are not, this year they don't have the talent to make any sort of run. I mean, their ceiling is maybe getting out of the first round. I don't even think they'll get out of the first round.
Yeah, I don't think so.
But you're right, Ryan. They've made tremendous strides, and now New York might be a more attractive free agent destination. So who knows who they might get in the next year or two, now that they're starting to win some games and they're starting to see some success. So
yeah, no, 100%. I mean, you said a lot of things I agree with. And one last thing before we move on, I wanted to point out the fact that Trevor said they're playing well this year, and while they might not get out of the first round, they probably won't. You're right, they probably won't. The important thing is they put in the work to get there, and I think that's important, because a lot of people are like, well, why don't you tank? There's Jalen Suggs, there's Cade Cunningham, there's Evan Mobley, right? There's a lot of good players in this draft this year. A really, really good draft class, especially at the top, but it's a really deep draft class in the lottery this year. And my answer to that is the lottery odds are worse than they ever used to be with the revised system. I mean, the Pelicans got Zion, Trevor. The Pelicans, I mean, they got the number one pick. They weren't even close to one of the worst teams in the NBA when they got that number one pick. So your odds don't even guarantee you a top pick necessarily. And more importantly, in order to become a good free agent destination, you have to build a solid culture, a solid foundation. And that's what the Knicks are doing now. That's what they lacked for years. That's why KD went to Brooklyn. That's why he went to the Nets, because the Knicks were such a defunct, joke of an organization for so many years that KD's like, I'm not going there. I'm not wasting my time there. And Kyrie followed him to Brooklyn. And now look, Brooklyn's probably going to the NBA Finals. So it's just important to have a winning culture like the Nets did, Trevor, when they fought for that 8th seed. Do you remember that? When they fought for that 8th seed, they barely scraped into the playoffs, I believe.
In the bubble?
Was it in the bubble? I also was remembering when they made the 8th seed with D'Angelo Russell, I believe they scraped in as well. But for multiple seasons, yeah. So they've scraped into the playoffs before, and I think that building that culture is important for a young team. To become not only a better, culture in the locker room, but to become a more attractive destination for free agents. So I just wanted to point that out because I think it's really important. But we can move on to your team, Trevor. I don't know which one you want to talk about first, but you take it.
I want to talk about the Clippers.
Okay.
And I want to talk about the fact that they've won 7 straight games, which is a little bit scary as a Suns fan and as a Western Conference fan in general. And I want to talk about this team's 3-point shooting, because I saw it firsthand the other night.
Man.
And I want to go through some of these percentages that these guys shoot the 3 at. Kawhi Leonard, 39.5%. Paul George, 44%. Marcus Morris, 48%. Reggie Jackson, 42%. Nick Batum, 42%. Patrick Beverley, 42%. Luke Kennard, 47%. Even Rajon Rondo, who's shooting, only 2.5 threes a game, is shooting 42%, right? So this team is making a ton of threes. I saw it firsthand. They didn't miss. It was making me want to break my TV because I could not stand watching Rajon Rondo, Nick Batum, Reggie Jackson make step-back threes left and right. And I just want to talk about how that is going to be very tough to beat in a 7-game series, right? In a 7-game series, you really zone in and focus in on an opponent. But when there's 7 or 8 guys just making threes, who do you guard? How do you play it?
Yeah.
You have Kawhi Leonard, who can create his own shot. You have Paul George, who can create his own shot. You have Marcus Morris, who's playing at a very high level right now. And then you have a lot of role players who can make threes. And that, I think, is a formula in today's NBA to win a championship. And I want to say the Clippers are going to be a very, very tough out this year. We'll see how they do in the playoffs, right? Because we saw Paul George really fold in the bubble. Kawhi Leonard folded in that Denver series, particularly in those last 3 games. So we'll see how they do when they're battle tested, right?
Yep.
How will they deal with adversity? That's always been the question with this team. But the way they're shooting threes right now is scary. And I think they can make a deep run in this postseason. I don't want to say they can win the West. Well, they can definitely win the West. I don't want to say they're the favorites to win the West. I put them 3rd behind the Lakers and my Suns, but they're shooting the ball incredibly well. And I think that's very scary.
Yeah, I mean, you pointed out the 3-point percentage, Trevor, and I mean, I have to point this out as well. I mean, they're shooting 42% from 3 as a team.
Crazy.
That's number 1 in the NBA. That's ridiculous.
It's crazy.
That's insane. That's a ridiculously high percentage for a team. 42% is basically elite, and for a team to be shooting that, that's just unbelievable. They're the number one ranked offense in the NBA. They're firing on all cylinders. Free throw percentage, number one in the NBA, very important for closing games out. Number one at 84% as a team. They don't pass the ball that much, but they don't need to because Paul George and Kawhi create their own shot, and if they don't have it, they'll give it up to one of the other guys, Batum, Marcus Morris, Serge Ibaka, any of those guys, and it's just fine. I mean, I don't know there's not much else to say other than I do want to point out one other thing. We don't know, Trevor. We don't know if this team will be any different than last year's until come playoff time. Because what happened last year, they played really well in the regular season. They got all cocky and arrogant, right? They're like, all right, we're going to go to the finals or the Western Conference Finals, play the Lakers. That's what's going to happen. And then, Trevor, that didn't happen. They got ahead of themselves. They lost to the Nuggets, and they looked like they were in shambles mentally. And we talked about that last year. We talked about it in the bubble, and I'm going to say it again. I don't know if that's changed going into this year, and I won't be able to tell until the playoffs start. If the playoffs start and they come out there, they're not messing around. They're beating teams they're supposed to beat, taking care of business. I'm going to say this is a different Clippers team. But until that time, I'm going to say this is the same Clippers team. I don't trust them come playoff time. There's just something gnawing at me in the back of my head from last year. Mostly the same roster. So that's just in the back of my head. I really think that they need to keep fans need to keep an eye on that because they broke down mentally last year, and I don't know if they're going to be able to change that this year. We'll see if Ty Lue's changed the culture enough to where they can stay strong come playoff time and take care of business.
Here's what I will say about that. One, people forget they were up 3-1 on Denver. So I think for me, after the pain of blowing a 3-1 lead, I feel like you're going to learn something from it. So for me, I believe in this Clippers team. Obviously, Paul George is very inconsistent in the playoffs. We've seen that in the past. But I do think this team learned something from last year. And I think Kawhi Leonard is too good of a player to not let this happen twice. I think Paul George is too good of a player to not let this happen twice. So I do believe in the Clippers. I do believe in them mentally. Now, the rest of the Western Conference has gotten better, right? So there's no saying that they're going to have more success. But, we'll see. Heartbreak like that can go two ways. It either ruins you or, you make something of it. So we'll see how this Clippers team responds. And right now, the way they're playing, the way they're shooting the ball, they're going to be a very tough out come playoff time.
Yeah, no, 100%. There's no doubt about that.
Trevor, one more thing. Sorry. Also, the other big thing.
Yeah.
A lot of resting and games off last year. I'm not seeing that as much this year. I'm seeing a lot of these guys playing together night in and night out. So we'll see if that also has an impact from playoff time.
I do remember a common theme last year, Trevor, is you kept saying, they keep resting their players, but we'll see that they'll come together come playoff time, and it never really happened. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like they never.
That's the issue with Brooklyn, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, but I think Brooklyn has enough.
Brooklyn is so far better. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. But yes, the same point stands, right? I mean, they haven't really fully played together too much. I mean, right? Harden's out right now. KD was out for a while, but I think they'll be fine. But the same point does still stand. But moving on to my other team, Trevor, that I wanted to talk about on this podcast. And it's a team that a lot of people might not expect me to talk about. It's the worst team in the NBA, actually.
I'm curious to hear this.
In the Minnesota Timberwolves. And you might be asking, Ryan, why are you wasting your time talking about this team? And the reason I want to talk about this team is because I don't think they should be this bad. Something's wrong here, Trevor. Something is very, very wrong. Okay? This team has talent. Malik Beasley, Josh Okogie, solid role players who play defense. Ricky Rubio, solid role player. Anthony Edwards, a rookie who I doubted. I didn't think he was going to be all that good. He's come on really strong this year, averaging 18 a game. Only shooting 31% from three, so he has to work on that. But he's making highlight plays. He shoots well from the free throw line, and he doesn't turn it over too much. So he's taking care of the basketball and shooting well from the line, getting to the line at a decent clip, and improving as the year goes on, which is exactly what you want to see out of a young 19-year-old like that. They have D'Angelo Russell, who's finally healthy, finally playing again, and they have Karl Anthony Towns. I mean, these are three players, Trevor, who could score at a near, at least two who can score at an elite level, a third in Anthony Edwards who can score at a, a pretty solid clip on his own, and they just keep losing. And I just don't get it because Russell's a solid player. He's averaging 20 a game, shooting 41% from three. Karl Anthony Towns obviously is an all-star when he's fully healthy, but they just don't win. And I don't get it. I don't know if it's coaching. I don't know if it's lack of defense. I mean, they do allow 118 points a game, which is third to last in the NBA. So they're really bad on the defensive end. Maybe that's the issue, but they're also only scoring 110 a game, which is 22nd in the NBA. They're not even putting up that many points. And with that offensive firepower, Trevor, I just had to talk about this team because they shouldn't be this bad. I really don't think so. And I really think that something needs to be done, whether it's head coaching, whether it's maybe it's one of the players, maybe it's Karl Anthony Towns. He's never really won in his career. I don't know what it is. There needs to be a change, and it needs to happen soon because they have a lot of talent, and they have a fair amount of talent, and they should be better than they are.
I agree with you. And I'll go back to that infamous Jimmy Butler story where he was on Minnesota and he ran with the third stringers or the bench guys against the rest of the starters in a 5-on-5 scrimmage, and they won. Yeah. And he famously leaves the practice facility yelling, "Y'all need me." And, it doesn't seem like Minnesota's ever been the same since then. In terms of this year, they haven't been healthy pretty much the entire year. And I guess now they're getting healthy, but when you're 30 games below 500 with 15 games left in a season, mentally, are you there fully? So for me, this season's a bit of a wash, in my opinion. I'm not going to judge a lot of what I see this season, for how I think they're going to be next year.
Sure.
But I think the bigger issue is there's just something wrong with this organization because they haven't seemed to they just can't get it right. They haven't found a coach in a long time. Arguably since maybe Flip Saunders
a while ago
in the Kevin Garnett days. Ryan Saunders didn't work out. This interim guy, I don't even know his name. He's probably not going to get rehired for next season. But I do say for Minnesota there are some bright spots. I think Anthony Edwards is definitely been a bright spot for them this season, and I think if they can stay healthy and get another really really high end draft pick, get a guy like Cunningham or Jalen Suggs or whoever, they'll be a formidable team next year. And I think they're going to have a decent roster.
Right.
And I think they need the right coach. I think that's the big thing. They haven't found the right guy yet. And we're seeing with some of these teams, I look at my Phoenix Suns. I love to talk about my Suns, but this will actually make sense. The Suns for years, cycling through coaches, Jeff Hornacek, Earl Watson, Igor Kokoshkov. Finally, our owner, and maybe it's the owner or whatever, fires the general manager and then finally gets a guy like Monty Williams. So they bring in a James Jones, they get a Monty Williams, and within 2 years, the team is on a collision course for a top 3 seed in the West. So I think for Minnesota, something like that can happen because they have players. You said, Ryan, they have Russell, they have Cat, they have other good role pieces. I think, another bright spot, Malik Beasley was really good for them when he was healthy this year. So for me, I think it starts at the top, and I think they need to figure out their front office and coaching before they can think about the success because they haven't seemed to got it right there for years.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have much else to say. It's probably something to do with the top, the ownership, the general manager, the head coach, like you said, and it's a whole culture thing. But I also think, Trevor, it's the injuries. D'Angelo Russell can't stay on the floor. Karl Anthony Towns can't stay on the floor either. Year after year, there's injuries, there's something. So maybe that has to do with it as well. I mean, you need your guys on the floor to win games, especially your elite players. So Malik Beasley's out now as well for many, many weeks or months, I think is what happened to him. So he's been out for a while. He will continue to be out for a while. So I think that's also an issue. It's just a mess. I wanted to point it out, though, just because I think this team should be better. I just do. I think this team has too much talent to not be better. So I needed to talk about them. I needed to point that out. And I hope that these players can either figure it out here or go to an organization where they can win some games because these players, some of these guys are too talented to sit on this travesty of a team, the worst team in the NBA. So I just wanted to point that out, but we can move on, Trevor, to your final team, to your second team here, our final team of the night in the Boston Celtics, right? And I don't know, what do you want to say about them?
I wanted to say, don't give up on Boston. I've defended them. They haven't been great this year. but they're on a little bit of a roll. They've won 4 in a row. They've beaten some good teams. They've beaten the Knicks, the Nuggets, and the Trailblazers, and the Timberwolves in that stretch. And I want to talk about Jason Tatum, and I want to talk about an overall surrounding theme. Tatum said he's still fighting the effects of COVID-19. He said he's using an inhaler before games. So clearly there's something there with him not being 100% most of the season. I think that's huge because once Tatum gets to 100%, I think his game will get taken to another level. They got Marcus Smart back. They have Jaylen Brown, and they have Kemba Walker. They have 4 very, very good players. They don't have a bench, and they don't really have great size or a good big men. But I do think this team it's one of those examples of, can they get hot late? It's a long regular season. We've seen it before. We've seen teams struggle in the middle, struggle before the All-Star break, injuries, blah, blah, blah. And then maybe they figure it out at the end of the year because it is a 72-game season, right? So for me, Boston's coming alive. I still think they're a formidable threat in the playoffs to maybe pull an upset on a Philadelphia or a Milwaukee. I don't think anyone's beating Brooklyn, but on a so point is Boston can make the Eastern Conference Finals. That's what I'm trying to say.
Okay.
And I still believe in this team because I do think they have a lot of talent. And I think that whole Jason Tatum thing was a little bit interesting. And I don't know. Don't give up on Boston. I think that's the moral of this story.
Yeah, Trevor, listen, here's the thing is I've always been kind of hesitant to go all in on Boston, Trevor, because they've always seemed to have just a little something missing. I mean, last year in the bubble, Trevor, we can remember, they played. You thought they would go to the Eastern Conference Finals, right? You're like, oh yeah, Boston. They could easily go to the finals, and they choked it away. They were unable to do it. I think they lost to Miami, right?
In the Eastern Conference Finals.
They did lose to Miami. Yeah, but it wasn't really all that close, in my opinion. And I don't see them ever getting over that hump. That's the thing. And this year just compounded the concerns for me. I know some people who are some big Boston Celtics fans, and they tell me, they say, Ryan, Jason Tatum, he's playing great right now, Trevor. They've won 4 in a row. He's averaging like 35 a game in this stretch, 25, 53, 28, 32. Those are his points the last 4 games. So he's played very, very well. But they keep telling me, Trevor, Tatum, he gets in his own head. He thinks he's more than he is. He takes terrible shots at times. He'll take contested fadeaway step back threes, and it's just like, it's such low percentage shots that it's infuriating to the Celtics fans because he doesn't make them a lot of the time unless he's on fire. And if he gets on fire, they say he cools off by shooting those shots and just ruins all momentum that he has. And it's the same thing with Jaylen Brown. And to me, this comes over to Brad Stevens, because if you're Brad Stevens, you got to tell your players, play within your team. Play the way that our offense is supposed to run. Get your guys good looks, get yourself open shots. Don't settle for bad shots outside the 3-point line. And that's been a problem with this team this year. And it was a problem for them last year. Tatum did that in the playoffs last year. He would take some fadeaway contested threes quite often. Jaylen Brown started to do it as well. And I think that it'll come back to bite him. I also think that their defense isn't quite as good as it used to be. Again, they're stepping up recently now. You're right. They've won 4 in a row, and they've had some good wins. But I just think that it's important to point out that this team has fooled us before, and I think they will fool us again, only because I think that there's just something missing. And that bench is important to note as well. Evan Fournier might be there, Trevor, but that's not going to mask the weakness of this bench. I mean, they lost Daniel Tice, their best center, in a trade, in this deadline. And I think that that's an important loss because he was a solid center. And now they have to rely on Robert Williams, who's a good player, but he's only 21 or 22 years old, and Tristan Thompson, who really has kind of fallen off recently. So I'm just skeptical of this team, Trevor. They just can't get over the hump ever for me, and I don't know if they ever will be able to. But I mean, sure, they have the potential to go far. I just don't know if they'll be able to get there because I don't really know if I trust them in the playoffs.
I disagree with you on a couple fronts here. One, the Miami series was quite competitive. You go back and look at the games, multiple overtime games, 6-game series. And they were 2 wins away from an NBA Finals. A couple of years before that, they were 1 win away from an NBA Finals. Who beat them? LeBron James. Yeah. Point being, it's hard to go to the NBA Finals. And leading into my next point, Boston's best players are 23 and 24. People forget Jason Tatum is 23 years old, right? This guy's best basketball is ahead of him. He's not even in his prime yet, and he's playing at such a high level. So I would not worry about Jason Tatum. Is he playing a little bit of hero ball? Maybe, but he's 23. I think he'll mature. I think he'll learn. And I think they need to get a little bit more of a reliable bench, because once you have that depth, I think your top players will be like, all right, I don't have to play hero ball. I don't have to take it on my shoulders when I get back into the game. We've seen it with LeBron, right? I'm not saying Tatum's LeBron, right? Don't get me wrong. But
Sure.
when LeBron goes out of the game for 2 minutes, the Cavaliers or the Lakers, whoever he plays for, go from up 9 to down 3 in 2 or 3 minutes. And now LeBron's like, all right, now I got to do this all myself. And I think Jason Tatum is feeling that a little bit with a bad bench this year. And he's not good enough. He's not LeBron, so he can't do it. I think he's going to mature. He's going to learn how to let the game come to him a little bit more. But let's not, come on. He's averaging 26 a game. He's shooting 45% from the field. It's not great, but it's pretty good. And he's 23. He's so young. His best basketball is ahead of him. And same with Jaylen Brown. Jaylen Brown's 24. I think those two guys are going to be a great duo for the next 5, at least probably next 8 years. So let's not, I don't want to pull the plug here on Boston, because we're seeing some patchy play in a long regular season and in a condensed regular season with a lot of injuries and a lot of other stuff going on.
I mean, that's very fair. But the thing with me, Trevor, is we had high expectations for the Celtics team, and justifiably so. They have the coach, they have the talent, but they're barely above 500, right? And sure, they're the 5 seed, but that's kind of deceiving, because as we've talked about at length, the 4 to 10 seed or 4 to 9 seed are within 4 games of each other.
Right.
So these teams are all around 500. They're all very, very jumbled up. And Boston's right there. So for me, I was expecting them to be in the upper echelon of the East, and they're not. At least not win percentage wise this year. And I don't think we can look over that, because I think they've taken a step back. Again, their bench is worse than ever. Evan Fournier is not even there when they're winning these 4 games. So I question if they can sustain these wins that they've had. But I just don't know if a team that's taken a step back in 2021 can go as far as they did last year in the playoffs. And if they're not going to the finals, Trevor, in the next 2 to 3 seasons, I mean, that's got to frustrate Celtics fans and the Celtics front office, because they put together an elite team for Brad Stevens. Brad Stevens is supposed to be an elite head coach. If you're an elite head coach and you have 5 to 6 years of elite players, or an elite team, I should say, in a conference, you got to make the finals at least one of those years. So for me, I need to see a little bit more out of Boston. I need to see more consistency. I like what I've seen the last week. Tatum's popping off game after game, but I don't know if that's sustainable. I really don't.
Right.
I don't think it is. So someone needs to step up. Someone on the bench needs to step up, really, and I don't think they will. Peyton Pritchard can only do so much, and Robert Williams is in the starting lineup now. They just don't have a lot of depth. So that just worries me. That just worries me, the lack of depth. And I just don't know if it's sustainable, the wins that they have right now, the win streak that they are on. But the sky is the limit with this team if they are able to get it together. I mean, if they can get it together, they've shown that they can go far. I just don't know if they can get it together and get past the second round of the East.
It's a fair point. We'll see. I'm not ready to give up on Boston. I definitely think with the right matchups, they can still get to the East Finals this year. No one's beating Brooklyn. I think you and I can agree on that, at least in the Eastern Conference.
Barring injury, yes.
Yeah, exactly. With that being said, Ryan, I think that'll just about – actually, I wanted to give one shout out. No, actually, I think you'll like this one, Ryan. I promise you. It's not about the Suns. It's about the Golden State Warriors, actually. I want to talk about Steph Curry. And how about following up a 53-point game with a 42-point game on 11 made threes in 29 minutes. Did not play in the fourth quarter.
Wow.
So Steph Curry is amazing. Kawhi Leonard, please don't go to Golden State. I don't think Golden State would have the money to pay you. Go somewhere else or stay in LA. Please don't go to Golden State. I've heard that rumor the last couple of days now.
Oh, no way.
That would be very frustrating, particularly as a Suns fan. But I want to give a shout out to Steph Curry. He's just built different. That's the best way of describing him. He's incredible. And he's going to find a way to will this Warriors team to the playoffs because he's just that good.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I agree. I was just about to say that. He's going to find a way to get this team into the playoffs. They are winners of 3 straight. They're the 9 seed now, Trevor, or they're tied for the 9 seed. And I mean, it's just unbelievable what he's done. Again, worst team record-wise in the NBA last year, all the way up to a 9 seed, just with one player coming back. So credit to Steph Curry. You're definitely right. They play Cleveland tomorrow night, my team. So I hope that we can come out victorious. But Steph Curry's crazy.
Ryan, what would a podcast be without mentioning the Phoenix Suns? It wouldn't be a podcast. And you mentioned before that you watched a game finally at length, or at least a half.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to note, in Devin Booker's worst game of the season, Mikal Bridges doesn't score. Chris Paul has a quiet night from the field. We beat the reigning Eastern Conference champions fully healthy, I will say, by 20 points. Killed them. And if that doesn't scream title contender, I don't know what will. I'm fine with the disrespect. I don't mind flying under the radar. But the Phoenix Suns are legit. And I want you to take the final word on this because you actually watched more of this game than I did.
I will take the final word on this, Trevor. Thank you very much. While the Phoenix Suns did play very well last night, their second unit just beat the Heat's first unit. I mean, it's true. I watched it happen. Jay Crowder played well. Cameron Payne played well. I mean, this whole second unit played very well. They outscored the Heat bench by I think about 40 points, Trevor, 35 points or so. So they just outperformed them significantly on the bench. And they're a great regular season team. They're a great story. I think they're one of the best teams of the regular season. I stand by my previous statements of I don't see them going deep in the playoffs because they need the experience first. Look at the Thunder.
I just thought of something else, but yeah, go
look
ahead.
at the Thunder with Chris Paul last year, Trevor. I mean, they made it to the playoffs as a 5 seed. Good on them, but they didn't go.
They were one shot away from winning that series.
They did, but they didn't go.
With a far worse roster.
They didn't go deep into the playoffs. The Utah Jazz, Trevor, the 1 seed in the West this year, have they gone deep into the playoffs before? No. They went further last year, but they lost to Denver.
In the first round, yeah.
Yeah, so do you see these teams at the top of the West and the Jazz and the Suns, they don't have that much winning experience. The Jazz lost first round last year. That's why I think they can go deep this year because they know what it's like to be in the playoffs. And with some fans back, Trevor, it's going to be different. It's going to be different for the Suns. They're not going to be used to it.
Well, Utah and Phoenix are going to have more fans than most other places. Just based on what right.
Okay, sure. I mean, sure.
You know what I mean? But you know what I'm getting at.
Yes. I mean, they'll allow more fans. I mean, you're probably right. But, I'm just saying, don't be surprised if the Suns lose in probably my prediction is the second round. I wouldn't be surprised if they lost in the first round, to be honest, if they got a Dallas or Portland matchup. I think both those teams are dangerous. Or a Golden State matchup. Steph Curry. I'm just saying Steph Curry has won, 3 NBA titles, Trevor? He knows how to win. He knows how to do it. Draymond knows how to do it. The Suns, they don't have it. So I think that's important to go deep into the playoffs. So I need to see it out of the Suns. Who knows?
Ryan,
maybe they can make a deep run. They're a great team this year. A great story. What a turnaround by the Suns, though. Great job for the organization to turn around.
You should be a politician because you can spin anything. You spun a 20-point win against the reigning Eastern Conference champions into a negative, and that takes a lot of skill. So for that, I applaud you.
Thank you.
Final point. Yes, I agree. The playoff experience is going to be an issue. And it actually led to a conspiracy theory in my head that the Lakers are going to try and play us in the first round, and I'm scared.
I mean,
because if I'm the Lakers, right, and I'm looking at the standings, would I rather play Denver in the first round? Jamal Murray list, maybe. Would I rather play the Clippers in the first round, or would I rather play Phoenix in the first round? And I think if I'm LeBron and Anthony Davis, I'm thinking we're going to play a team that has virtually no playoff experience outside of Chris Paul, and I guess you could say Jay Crowder. Yeah, Jay Crowder's playoff experience for sure. And we're going to be playing a bunch of young guys in their young 20s who have no idea what playoff basketball is like. For me, that's a little scary. I hope the Lakers don't tank to 6 or 7. So we'll see. I just thought about that, and I guess that's just going to fuel Ryan's fire. So probably shouldn't have brought that up. So
yeah, I mean, we can wrap it up here, Trevor. I'm interested to see how the Phoenix Suns close out the season. I'm assuredly, Trevor, I will bring up the Suns on either next week's or the podcast 3 weeks from now because we'll have to talk about the draft in 2 weeks. But
Mm.
I will bring up the Suns. I will talk about the Suns. I'm interested to see how they close out the year. I'm really interested to see if they can hold on to that 2 seed. The Clippers are coming on strong. I'd be a little nervous, Trevor. If you fall into that 3 seed, the Lakers or the Blazers.
I am a little nervous.
The Lakers or the Blazers at the 6th spot are going to be tough teams to play first round. So you better hope you hold on for dear life onto that 2 seed. But
Totally agree with you there.
with that, Trevor, we can wrap up this podcast. It was a good one. I hope everyone enjoyed. And